18 months ago, 19 months ago, the players of the National Football League made a decision to go in a different direction. I followed a guy who had this job for 26 years, a man by the name of Gene Upshaw. Not only was Gene a tremendous football player on the field, everyone knows he also was a Hall of Fame caliber player. But to put my job in perspective just a little bit, the awe and frankly the fear and trembling that I have every day in this job is that was Gene's first job. His second job was to basically take a small association, organization of players who had no money, no workers' comp benefits, no pensions, no grievance procedures. Nothing good would happen to them after they got hurt except they would lose their jobs. He took that organization, and his second job was to hold my job for 26 years. So there are two things that come out of my respect for a guy named Gene Upshaw. First, his courage and his ability on the field, but his second job of leading this union for 26 years. The way that story ended, at least that chapter ended for Gene, is he went into the hospital on a Wednesday and was dead on a Sunday. So into that breach stepped guys like Drew Brees. New Orleans fans? Yeah. Into that breach stepped guys like Jeff Saturday and Tony Richardson and Kevin Mawai and Mark Bruner and Dominique Foxworth. But my greatest thrill was that these young men stepped into the breach to not only make a decision about who was going to take this job, but those young men lost their leader of 26 years. In their lifetime, they knew no one else other than Gene Upshaw as the head of this union. And my greatest amount of pride and the thrill and really the segue of what I want to spend a few minutes talking to you today is about the incredible leap of faith that these young men took. And the beautiful thing about faith, you take that step without knowing how it's going to end. I've got a job where I have taken a pretty interesting step where, frankly, I don't know how it's going to end. But I do know a couple of things. Upon this rock I stand. On faith, we will make our steps to go forward because that is the same faith I have had in my Christ since a young boy. It is going to be upon faith that we will move forward because that's how I was taught and trained to be a leader by guys like Coach Elvin King. We will make smart decisions and move forward even if we don't know how it's going to end because I was blessed to have professors like Dr. Murdoch and Dr. Gary Persisepi. And I know that regardless of what we do, our organization will end up stronger, more vibrant, and more dedicated to the people it is to serve because I understand vision and leadership from men like Dr. Brown. One of the coolest moments of my life, I'm down at the Pro Bowl. So there's Kevin Mawai, all 6'4" of him, who's the president of our organization. And let me just say something as an aside. You will never find a stronger man in faith than Kevin Mawai. That's my boss. That's pretty cool. But there he is on the field, and on the other side of him, the NFC is there. So DeMaurice Ware is there, Jason Witten's there. Matt Castle's there, Brian Dawkins is there. All of these guys are not only tremendous football players, but every guy that I named are also leaders in their union. I can only demonstrate this by coming off this stage. They say, hey, come on out on the field. Come on out on the field? So I'm walking out on the field, and they go, stand in the huddle and lead us. So I walk into the huddle on the Pro Bowl field I'm surrounded by all of these guys that I used to watch every Sunday. And the first thought I have as they're all huddling around me is, I can't see light. I can't breathe. If they stand any closer to me, I'm going to suffocate and die. Because, as all of you can now see from my hulking, tall mass, I'm not a tall guy. So I've got this job, and I'm trying to lead these guys in a huddle, and I'm trying to catch a breath. And then Kevin Mawai says, "Come on, D, stand up." But you know what? Why is this job so cool? Everybody took a half a step backwards, which was nice. But then Brian Dawkins stepped forward and he said, "Lead." And I said, "I want you to be good men in your communities. I want you to be good fathers. I want you to be good sons. I want you to represent yourself on this field in the same way that you would want your boy, your daughter, and everybody to come after him to represent themselves. Not only are you players of the National Football League, you are leaders of our organization. And if you thought that you hired someone to push this rock up the hill by himself, you didn't. I took this job because I knew I would be surrounded by people who had faith and knew how to lead. So on faith, my biblical hero has always been Abraham. Because to me, it is so easy to read and understand and learn the great lessons of the Bible, but I've always been sensitive to the fact that every time we read those stories, even if we start off at the beginning, there's nobody in this room who doesn't know how it ends. That's the beauty of history, but it's also the curse of history. But look, we all know how the story ends, but when you put yourself in Abraham's shoes and he's told by God to make such a tremendous sacrifice, he's taking a step where he doesn't know how it's going to end. So I look at my faith and I look at, where we are, the things that we have to deal with. So where do I find my lessons? Where do you find your levels of inspiration? I find them in the same lessons that I learned as a child, except now they mean a whole lot more. When I know there's not a lot of people out here who have held your child when it comes out for the first time. That miracle and look, every father, every mother will tell you, and they're lying if they don't tell you this. From the moment your child is born, you are utterly terrified. I'm 46 years old. I don't know enough to be a dad. But look, when your child is born, you are so utterly terrified because you say to yourself, what am I going to do? And now I can see, friends that I went to school with and their children are sitting next to them. Why? Because it's not that they knew what to do. They had faith that they could take a step, even if they didn't know how it was going to end. Abraham takes that step with his son Isaac. And what a tremendous step of faith that he has to do something that we would all admit and say, that's the most horrible thing that could possibly happen. But he took that step. I look at my wife, and we've been married 18 years. And I will tell you that it is primarily predicated upon fear. I'm afraid of my wife. And I'm not kidding, actually. The times in your life when they wonderfully give you your children who you hold so dear, but then you fast forward some years and you're at the doctor's, and the doctor has told you that your wife has breast cancer. And you deal with it in that moment together without saying the one thing that you know terrifies you the most. You're going to have to go back to the two children that you have, and at some point, you're going to have the conversation with them that mom has breast cancer. And you see the courage and truly the strength that I'm blessed to have in my wife of 18 years. And again, in that moment when we tell our kids and then move through the horrible chemo and the radiation and the surgeries and the hair loss and all of the things that physically impact you and question whether or not you can truly take the next step. But yet you do. We both did. Because she has a faith and courage of being able to take a step not knowing how it's going to end. So, it is into that context that people sometimes will ask me, well, what is it like to take over a job from a guy who had it for 26 years? What is it like to come in contact and have to motivate players in a way that you've never had that contact before? What is it like to deal with 32 owners who have the reputation for being difficult? Well, I'll tell you what, I don't know the answers to all of those questions, but like Abraham, like the people that I went to school with, like my wife, like the leaders, like the vision of this great university, I don't know what the next step is going to be, but I can tell you I have faith and trust that we have been prepared and we are solidified in our faith to make that next step.